will never bother me again the rest of my life. I ain't giving them that stuff. I can't. They're good friends of mine, I'm gonna say. Well, he's the boss, you have to do it first. That's why I said to you before, you don't understand what the money is. The most of me is that the boss is your boss.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. If you are new to the channel, please do us a solid. And please hit the like, subscribe, and always share our content. Also, feel free to donate by hitting the thanks button or hitting up our Cash Apps, our PayPals, or anything like that. All the money goes back into research for the show. Okay, so I wanted to get into something that we broke years ago. Let me pull this up really quick. Move that over there. Let's see. Okay. So I waited for several days before I reported on this. And even though we broke the story, we were the first outlet to cover that Anthony Comello had been sentenced. I wanted to wait and see how many content creators came out and lied. Right. And so here's sort of what's going on. Be careful who you listen to, because recently a podcast or a content creator put out a video and there was lie after lie after lie about Anthony Comello. He tried to infer Comello's related to gangsters and his father was a gangster, and all of those statements are false. And it is unequivocally untrue. Number one, and you will ask, how do I know? Well, I know because the amount of documents that came out early on in this case, I have. Now everything has been sealed. Most of the Comello case is. If you were to go and research this case now, you're not going to find anything. And there's a reason for that. We'll sort of get into that. So anybody saying they heard this, they heard that, they know this, it's just nonsense, and they're inventing it. And they're trying to draw parallels to something where there is none. So, if you can't establish something as a fact and it's just gossip, then it's not a fact. But people intentionally, sometimes I think, try to talk about cases they don't know anything about and try to make, parallels to stuff because they don't know any better, or they just don't know anything, so they invent it. And the little twerp who did this can make up whatever he wants. But we were the first to break the news that not only was Frank Cali murdered, but we were the first to break the news that this case was resolved. In fact, we're really the only outlet that's covered it multiple times. The reason why, like I said, I held off on reporting this is because I wanted to see how many people would just come out and start lying and inventing shit that doesn't exist. And there was only one that did it, and you can figure out who that is. But imagine that. Number one, Anthony Comello was not, nor was his family, involved in anything mob related. A content creator said that his father was an old school guy trying to infer that Anthony Comello's father was associated with gangsters or something like that. Once again, that's another stereotype and a lie from the dwarf down under. That's just what he does. On March 13th of 2019, Frank Cali was murdered in front of his home by a QAnon nut by the name of Anthony Comello. It took 3 days for the police to arrest Comello for the crime. Didn't stop the FBI from blaming Genie Gotti for it, even though he had nothing to do with it. Well, under questioning, Comello changed his story a half a dozen times. In court, Comello's attorney explained to the judge that Comello had become a QAnon conspiracy theorist and was convicted that Frank Cali was involved in the deep state. Comello had gone there to conduct a civil arrest on Frank Cali. Comello then drove to Cali's home and ran the back of Cali's car. And when Cali came outside to confront Comello, Comello opened fire, murdering Frank Cali right in front of his house. The thing is, And this is what these buffoons don't tell you, and what we've told you from day one. Cali knew who Anthony Comello was, which leads to the sort of circumspect sort of question of why would Frank Cali even go and speak to the guy? But there's a reason why. Comello had been stalking his niece and had been for months and had done it multiple times. And more than once, others and Cali told Comello to beat it and to leave the girl alone. We broke that story, but that was not the first time that Comello had stalked an alleged gangster's relative. This was his MO. A year prior to that, Anthony Comello had stalked the daughter of an alleged made guy within the Cavalcante crime family. He called, Instagram stalking, texts, and even showing up at her work. And I know that to be the case because I spoke to the people involved. This was from almost out of the gate. Comello was no stranger to stalking women. That was kind of his thing. And those are facts, which we broke, nobody else. In fact, nobody else has even said it. For years, Comello had toiled pretty much in the insane asylum, and in between those events, his family's home was torched, and there were various threats that came in as Comello allegedly killed, according to the FBI, the head of the Gambino crime family. Even the police admitted and stated that this event was due to a personal issue, not some wild conspiracy-laden event that involved organized crime. Comello refused to adhere or take psychiatric medications and exams, fearing that his insanity defense would not be bolstered by his bullshit excuses for the murder of Frank Cali. After months of legal wrangling, Comello then took the exam and failed, making him mentally unfit to stand trial. And it went that way for years. Eventually, Comello's family would be forced to move from the area after a series of events and threats. At no time did he or his brother have any mafia affiliations, ties, or anything else. Anybody telling you that is lying to you. This was simply a case of a nut job who was stalking women and then, when chased, reacted. Between, then and the other day when we broke the story that Comello's case had been finalized, he had pretty much been toiling in a psych unit in upstate New York, where he was being protected for his own safety. The judge overseeing the case sealed everything in the case. Comello's first-degree murder charge had been changed to manslaughter, and he was sentenced to prison in an undisclosed location for an undisclosed amount of time. He is not serving his time in a regular prison either. He is serving his time on a mental wing of a prison in a state that I'm not going to divulge. The proceedings of the court case are completely and utterly sealed. So anybody that tells you anything else or saying, oh, I have this or I have that, is lying to you, unless they got it from day one. Because if you got it from day one, you had the indictment, you had the facts, you had the narrative, you had the things that had been said. But then after a certain period, that case became sealed. But it was not immediately like that. And that's why I have stuff that probably a lot of other people don't. That being said, this was, not a mob case. This was absolutely not a mob case. It only became that publicly because of who was murdered and the allegations that were levied by Frank Cali, according to the FBI. And too many people have made this out to be something that it really, truly never was. And that's why all of you come here. Nothing but the facts, the truth, and proven truths at that. So as you know, Frank Cali, according to the FBI, was the boss of the Gambino crime family, and later indictments both here and in Italy show us that, albeit externally, how powerful the alleged leader of the crime family was. And dozens of wiretaps and surveillance video showed Frank Cali meeting with members of Cosa Nostra in Italy, presiding over an induction ceremony. In more than a handful of wiretaps, Cali was referred to as the boss. And it's truly the first time in mob history that an American mob boss was considered a boss in another country as well. It's basically what we see with Andrangata in Canada, is what we saw within Frank Cali. Even the strength of Carlo Gambino in controlling the eastern seaboard and everything that came with that, Cali was a bigger, more powerful version of Carlo Gambino. And Cali was a ghost, and for good reason. and he remained off the radar and off the paper trail like one is supposed to. Which is why for years, content creators in the FBI put the name of somebody else in as boss, and they were completely and utterly wrong. Weren't even close. And that's how it's supposed to be done. And with all the threats against Comello and his family, I'm not sure what the fate of Comello will be. But he's never going to be in a Gen Pop type of situation. And think of John Hinckley, who shot at Reagan. It's going to be that type of sort of atmosphere. And over the years, a lot of people have asked me, do they think, or do I think that Frank Cali would have ever been indicted? And it turns out that he would have been. Because we know from those wiretaps, like I mentioned earlier, and the video footage that he was seen in, that was a part of an indictment that came down a couple of years ago, which included, I believe, 10 guys in the Gambinos here in New York, and I believe 5 in Italy. So, like I said, anybody that is telling you that Anthony Comello had mob ties and he hung out with this one, or his dad used an old school guy, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's innuendo and it's stereotyping. That's all it is. And some people think that stereotyping makes it a fact, and it doesn't. When you call somebody an old school guy, you have old school values. It doesn't mean you're a gangster. It doesn't mean you pal around with gangsters. And the proof in me telling you that is to tell you this. If Anthony Comello's father was a knockaround guy, or let me use the exact quotes, an old school guy, then I don't think if there was going to be any sort of retribution involved in this, it would have happened immediately and without hesitation. And that's the truth. That's what lends the truth that his father was a nobody. Just why people make this stuff up or invent it is beyond my understanding. What happened to Frank Cali, regardless of the allegations that the FBI levied against him, it wasn't right. It was a scumbag thing. It was an awful, tragic thing. And it is what it is. But like I said, I don't know the determination that the courts made in sentencing or what the guidelines were, because I think a lot of this is sort of hinged on the fact that Comello was found to be mentally not fit to stand trial. I don't know if the family was even notified that this case was resolved. I do not know why they would reduce first-degree murder charges to manslaughter, because this was a premeditated murder. 100%. This was not a fly-by-night, oh, let me just get up today and go do this. This was premeditated. All the signs showed that it was premeditated, and it did not hinge on organized crime. It hinged on the fact that he was stalking girls. And those are the facts. And anybody that tells you opposite of that is bullshitting you. I don't know what's to come of this case, but I do know that if you look at this from the aspect, if we put aside what the government has told us about Frank Cali for just 1 minute, the reality that this guy may not spend the rest of his life in prison after the brutal murder of a human being, regardless of who he was, that's a side note to all of this, is shocking to me. It's shocking to me. And, with the threats and everything that's happened to his family, I think we can all sort of, not that we're saying that that's a great thing, but I think we can all understand that on a visceral level, why that might be the case. And if there is any sort of clout or any truth to how powerful Frank Cali actually was, then I don't think it's going to matter a whole hell of a lot where the hell they put him. I'm just being honest with you. Not that two wrongs make a right in that situation either. But that's the update on Anthony Comello. The case is resolved. It's been over with. We were the first to break it, just like we were the first to discuss the Frank Cali murder. And we were the first to let you guys know that Comello really necessarily wasn't a nut, but he was a kid with severe mental issues who was stalking women. And that's what this case was all about. The external QAnon bullshit is just something that I think he did to try to spin a narrative. Kid's a psychotic killer. That's all there is to it. Anyway, do us a favor. Donate if you can. Like, share, and subscribe.
start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it. New York, New York. These vagabond shoes are longing to stray right through the very heart of it. New York, New York. I want to wake up in a city that doesn't sleep and find I'm king of the hill, top of the heap. These little town blues are melting away. I'll make a brand new start of it in old New York. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York, New York. New York, New York. I want to wake up in a city that never sleeps and find I'm a number one, top of the list, king of the hill, a number one. These little town blues are melting away. I'm gonna make a brand new start of it in old New York. And if I can make it there, I'm gonna make it anywhere. It's up to you, New